Thank you. I'm very honored to be with you. And I apologize for not being there in person. I had a recent car accident which left me with some brain trauma, and so travel is a little bit difficult for me. And I also apologize if I make any mistakes in speaking or if my logic doesn't flow. This time, you can attribute it to, physiological causes. So I just want to start by telling everybody that I believe that we are in a very, very dangerous place. I believe that we are escalating to war imminently. I believe that we're very, very close to war with China. We're already at war in the Middle East. We're already at war in Europe with Russia. And I believe that we're escalating imminently to war against China. And it gives me no pleasure to say this. And I have been speaking in this manner for a long time. But I believe that we're getting closer and closer to the precipice. Not to, pat myself on the back, but I predicted that war would break out with Russia. Several months ago, I predicted that war would break out with Iran. And I have been predicting that the US is escalating to war against China and that we're very close to war. And I feel like a Cassandra for always saying this, but I believe that it's an important message to get across. Just a quick reminder, in case any one of us needs a reminder, is just how horrific war is. Currently, as we look at the war, the genocide happening in Palestine, we're seeing children maimed, shot, tortured, starved to death. We see parents being shot dead for the crime of wanting to feed their children. We see doctors shot dead for the crime of saving lives. We see journalists shot dead for the crime of telling the truth. And we see people shot dead simply for being Palestinian, for being in that territory. So we know how horrific this is. And even on a personal level, I can tell you many stories of my own family which would reflect on this horror. And I think that, but I don't think I need to do that. I think as veterans, or mostly veterans, I think we know a little bit about what this looks and feels like. But let me tell you what I see and why I'm making this argument. Of course, we can look at the policy papers, Defense Planning Guidance Document, PNAC, all of these policy papers that have been preparing and laying the ideological ground for war. We can also see the grand strategy, the Defense Planning Guidance Document, the National Security Strategy, National Defense Strategy. We can also see the legislation and the appropriations, and then we can see that trickle down into specific policy on the ground, including exercises and industrial capacity and specific alliances. All of that is visible. And we can also look back at the history. Now, for example, the US history of China is really a five-phase history. The first phase was really colonization. The second was war. That's 1949 to 1970s until the Nixon administration. Then we had a short period of détente, 1979 to 1990. And then after that, we really had a policy of engagement that was predicated on regime change and absorption. That was 1990 to about 2008, when the idea was that China would either collapse of its own inner contradictions, or it would be absorbed into the US system and would become a subaltern, subcontract to the United States imperial regime. And starting 2008, we pivoted back to a war footing. So we started to see the doctrine of war that was planned. It was called air-sea battle, which was based on the US doctrine of war against the Soviet Union called air-land battle. which itself was based on Israeli war doctrine from the Yom Kippur War. And so essentially it was a plan of decapitation and shock and awe for China. It was been planning this out since 2008. And along with air-sea battle, we saw the pivot to Asia, which was the formal declaration to encircle and contain, in the sense of containing, in the sense of rolling back. And then we also saw the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was the economic arm of the warfare. I want to point out that if we look at war, we can notice three distinct phases. The first phase is information war. When the US decides that it's going to go to war with a country, it has to manufacture consent, rolls the war out as a marketing campaign, as a product. And this involves massive demonization, massive threat inflation in order to manufacture consent. I believe that that has been happening nonstop and has been continuously accelerating. It's reached the threshold where war is possible. 83% of the US population believes that China is a threat. And of course, they've specifically calendared the date that we are supposed to go to war, around 2027. The second phase of war is, or the second signal of the preparation of war, is preparing the theater. It means you're staging the theater for war, and that includes preparing the troops, doing exercises, drawing up reserves. And if you ask students, for example, who are reservists, they keep missing classes, and if you ask them why they're not coming to class, these days they'll simply just tell you, we are going to war with China. And these exercises become more and more frequent and more intense. We also see pre-positioning of troops, of weapons, of logistical supplies, of fuel, and we also see the massive building out of alliances. And then the third element, which really tells you we're getting close, is we see constant provocation. That is, it's like in basketball, you're constantly driving into the paint, seeing if you can draw the foul. And once you draw the foul, then you get the entire house to come down from the bleachers, onto the court and start fighting. And so I believe that this is very, very advanced. And, just going back to the idea of information war, we all know that truth is the first casualty of war. And we know that war is characterized by the shaping of, or the deforming of reality and the deforming of words. When countries go to war, the first thing that is drafted are the words. So of course, defense really means offense, operations means war, deter means to provoke, rotational presence means military base, forward base, security means hegemony, anti-access area defense means defense, etc. So the language gets distorted, and we're full into that part already. But the other signal I will point out is that the farther we are from close, or the farther we are from the truth, the closer we are to war. And so when you hear absurdities, we have to understand that we're being prepared for atrocities. Those who tell you absurdities are preparing you for atrocities. Second thing I will point out, and this relates to preparing the theater, is the degree and the intensity and the scope and the duration and the tempo of the military exercises that are being conducted right now. Currently, the US is doing department-level exercises. And I don't know how many of you have been in department-level exercises. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But if you look it up on the internet, you will not find very much about department-level exercises because they haven't been done. They happened before the internet was invented. That's how That's how long it's been since we've done department level exercises. So, you can have exercises, between, brigades, divisions, even army corps or even armies. And you have, field training exercise, command post exercise, deployment exercises. This is bigger than all of them. This is a great big granddaddy of all exercises. You're literally taking entire departments and making them work together. So we're talking about the Department of the Army, the entire department, working with the Space Force itself and coordinating on exercises. And then this creates an overarching umbrella for which to coordinate the smaller exercises. Smaller, right? We're talking about exercises that involve 19 countries, Talisman Sabre, which is going on right now, or other exercises. But the intensity and the scale and the scope and the pacing of these exercises keeps getting more and more intense. Let's just look at Korea, for example. When I was in the military, you would do team spirit, it would last a few weeks. Nowadays, on 2023, they did 250 days of exercises. Last year, 2024, they did 275 days of exercises, almost non-stop exercises. And this included 20 nuclear bombing runs. And they're actually talking about placing nuclear weapons on Korean soil. Just a few months ago, we had a live bombing exercise, and that exercise damaged or destroyed 150 houses in a village called Nogongni in South Korea. Why is this happening? Well, first, because you're using live ammunition. But the second piece is you're doing the exercise at such an extraordinary scale and scope and tempo that you're going to get these kinds of errors. In other words, just as you get friendly fire errors in war, when you have your military exercise approaching that tempo and intensity, you're going to get friendly fire exercises with collateral damage in rehearsal. And so we're looking at technical rehearsals, dress rehearsals. We're very, very close to the real production. Another thing, these are things that I noticed, but I think are important. US troops are actually rehearsing to transfer POWs. I don't know when was the last time that you did a military exercises that was so granular that it involved the transfer of POWs. But this is the level at which they're doing that. And I also want to point out that very recently, the Yoon Suk-yeol, South Korean government, almost provoked a war against North Korea. It's very good evidence that has come out right now that Yoon Suk-yeol had sent multiple drones into North Korea with the idea that they would provoke a war with North Korea. And this would do two things. One, it would justify his military coup, that is declaring martial law. But secondly, once war with North Korea breaks out, because the United States has operational control over South Korea's troops, 3.6 million troops, if you include reservists, automatically fall under US military control. So that gives you a lot of cannon fodder to work with. But once again, always the continued escalating scale, scope, intensity, tempo of the war exercises lets us know that this is not a drill. It's staging, it's tech rehearsal. The full production is coming very, very soon. So I also want to touch on people who think, no, it's not happening, or it can't be happening. And I understand, none of us want war. And we have a lot of defenses that will, make us think that it can't be happening. We'd rather, be in at least a little bit of denial. And of course, some people say, well, Trump wants peace. And to that I have to say, Trump is not a peace president. If you think that, you are sorely misguided. His administration is filled with neocon hawks who are agitating and militating for war, which is why we see continual escalation, war in Iran, war in Europe, war in the Middle East, and soon to come, war against China, war in the Pacific. Now people say, you know, it's insane, it's irrational, why would they do that? And I want to remind us about how insane and irrational US policy has been. I mean, of course we can say, you know, it is the greatest purveyor of violence and all those things, but I want you to think about specific individuals. People like Curtis LeMay or Kurt Campbell. Kurt Campbell, you know, was Assistant Secretary of Defense for Policy. He said, and I'm quoting him verbatim, he said that he would unleash a magnificent symphony of death in Asia. This is the language they use, magnificent symphony of death. Do you remember Stuart Seldowitz? He was the State Department hack who was responsible for policy on Palestine, and he was aggressing this falafel vendor and telling him, you know, 5,000 dead Palestinian kids is not enough. You know, you think it's enough, it's not enough. And he was saying it openly as he was being filmed. So if you think that, if you want to appeal to the better angels, or if you think that irrationality is the thing that, you know, will prevent a war, I think we have something, I think we're in for a surprise. You know, other people say, you know, it's about, you know, it would be bad for trade and the economy, but we're currently decoupling. We're in a tariff war. That tariff war is designed to see if they can force other countries to decouple from China en masse. Same as the original plan of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And then, of course, you know, related to the rationality, you know, people who say there's no way we can win, and this is true, there's no way we can win a conventional war. And if you watch, for example, again, Elbridge Colby talking with Lyle Goldstein. Elbridge Colby is Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, and Lyle Goldstein is an expert at the US War College on Taiwan. And if you hear them talking, you know, Lyle Goldstein says to Elbridge Colby, there is no way we can win. I've been studying this for 3 decades. There's no way we can win this war. And it's a family quarrel that we just shouldn't get involved in. And then Elbridge Colby responds, and these are his, you know, real feelings coming through. He says we have to. For him, it's an ideological crusade. But not only that, but if you read Elbridge Colby for about 10 years now, he has been arguing before the Senate Arms Committee, writing policy papers, and now he is, you know, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. He is saying that we have an ace in the hole, and that is nuclear weapons. We have to incorporate the use of nuclear weapons into our war with China. This is how we make it work for us. And the Atlantic Council has also said this as well. Atlantic Council has said, you know, we make the spectrum of war simply a single continuum so that we can move easily and simply between conventional and nuclear war. So this is their ace in the hole. The ace in the hole is nuclear war. And not simply nuclear war, but probably a nuclear first strike. That is a nuclear sucker punch. That is what they are relying on. Technically, what's called a counterforce doctrine. And so we're in a very, very dangerous place. And I sometimes talk to people and I tell them, you know, the US has a grizzly bear fallacy. 6% of sentient adults in the United States believe that they can fight a grizzly bear with their bare hands and beat it. And they even have diagrams, you know, and little, you know, booklets on how to, you know, how to take down a bear. It's insane, but the insanity is baked into the system. And the people who want to use nukes are crazy because it will mean the end of the world. But remember, the ruling imperial elite, I believe, would see the end of the world than the end of their power and privilege. And some people say, well, we'll all be dead. That would be insane. But I think, as I said, some of them think that they can win. That they believe in a nuclear sucker punch that will make them win. And some of them think they can survive. They have their bunkers. Zuckerberg has his bunker in Hawaii. The ruling elite believe that they can survive, and the planet has too many people anywhere. And then, if I were to be cynical as they are, I would say that some of them believe in the rapture, that they have a conflict of interest, and that they have this desire to bring about the end of the world so that they can all go up and be raptured. And some of them, and I'm joking here, but some of them look like they're already dead. I mean, Peter Thiel looks like the warmed over corpse of Roy Cohn. I mean, he looks like looks like an AI. I don't think they're alive. But all of this boils down to is that I believe that they're willing to risk the end of the planet in order to maintain their power and privilege. And that power and privilege really is about, it also has to do with the issues of late stage capitalism. Capitalism is always in crisis, and as it really hits, as really the stuff hits the fan, the way that they defibrillate, the dying corpse of it is to pull off the wall defibrillator and jumpstart it, and that is always war. So I want us to be mindful that this is a very, very dangerous moment. Now, the last thing I'll say, just one more minute, we can have a lot of theories and we can have a lot of doubt, and there are many things that determine our, discernment one way or the other. And I want to put out this notion of signal detection theory. Some of you were, radio corpsmen, you may know signal detection theory, but it's the idea there's a normal distribution, there is noise, and then there is signal. And noise and signal always gets mixed in together. And what you have to do is you kind of have to discern where you want to put your discernment. If you have too much, if you include too much noise, then you're going to essentially fill yourself with, false alarms, and essentially you create a conspiracy theory. Now, if you want to get rid of all noise and you only want signal, then you're going to miss a lot of really, really important cues. And therefore, you are going to not be aware. You're going to be caught flat-footed. My feeling is that we are working too much on signal. We're not looking at, we're missing a lot of the signals that are coming through. And as I point out, currently what we have now, the signals are wars happening everywhere. The exercise are incredibly intense. Everything, the prepositioning, logistics, the exercises, the alliance, everything signals, is signaling, it's flashing red. And we see this constant, escalation. And I'm not talking about, peanut butter, the amount of peanut butter being sent to troops, or, lobster and steak being sent to troops, or the amount of pizza being eaten in Washington. They say when there's too much pizza being ordered in Washington, they're, working late and they're preparing something catastrophic. I'm not talking about those signals. I'm really talking about signals that have to do with really, really dangerous levels of escalation and preparation. And if we ignore that to our detriment. I believe that we're a very, very dangerous moment in history, and I believe it's incumbent upon everybody, all of us, especially Veterans for Peace, to take action and to see if we can dial this down, or else all bets are off. Thank you.
Thank you.